The U.S. is about 4 months into the new administration's policies, and most people are bewildered. I said to pick your battle during last year's election because some people did not like either candidate. The battle chosen was one that was familiar. The other party's battle of extreme transgendered policy, DEI, and reproductive rights was a bit too complex or novel for some. So here we are fighting the old sexism, racism, and democracy fight. We have been here before, fighting sexism with Roe versus Wade, racism with the Civil Rights Movement, and for democracy with the Cold War. I acknowledge that some people may argue that the Cold War wasn't about democracy. Anyhow, for those who are on the fence about both candidates, here is the battle we now face. I also think that with Musk involved, the mind control battle is back on the table because he is involved with brain chip research, but that is a topic for another time. This video will review what I said in the See It Coming 2024 videos and review what has happened since then. I'm not on anyone's side. My concern is for the whole country. I agree with some of Trump's policies and disagree with some of his policies. I agree with some of his policies, but disagree with some of the ways he is going about them. That's where I stand. I started the See It Coming videos by saying the US government is being destabilized. I then explained how some government officials see this and are trying to save it while others have not. I have no hard evidence to prove this statement, but the last 4 months with the new administration validates that statement. The new administration admits that it wants to do something like tear down the current government and replace it with a new one. I talked about how Trump could use winning the election to pressure his Republican opponents to assimilate or get out. This is roughly the actual message that is currently being sent to the administration's internal opponents. I've read recent articles that have reported that many Republicans have been afraid to speak against Trump because they have been threatened or feel threatened by his constituents. I used two quotes, everything in moderation and too much of a good thing isn't a good thing, when talking about the Democrats. I said, in other words, overzealous inclusive efforts could leave others feeling excluded. Not all the people who are dubious about inclusivity efforts are resistant or racist. Some tolerant people could just feel excluded or that their concerns are not being considered by all the inclusivity efforts. Democrats must explain to their base that there needs to be a shift towards a more balanced approach to diversity and inclusion and anti-racism efforts. Going hard helped make big strides in the beginning, but it also caused the backlash that the Democrats are currently feeling, and that is helping Trump. If Democrats keep going hard, that can actually hurt or undo all the things that worked in the beginning. A lot of things such as DEI and transgender initiatives have been tossed. Many voters agreed with these moves. The Democrats are currently lost and scattered. During the election, they were living on the internet in their social media hubs and forgot that the real world had a real impact on their lives, especially during an election. When Biden and Harris won the last election, they had majority support for most of their unification and equality efforts. As time went on, they started to lose people by focusing too much on certain groups at the expense of others who mostly supported them, pushing too hard on initiatives that made some genders feel unsafe or felt unfair, adopting poorly implemented initiatives, took parents out of the equation when it came to their underage child's reproductive activities, and went after the children by introducing adult topics too early, etc. They promised to beat Trump, and they didn't. The Democrats let down the people who gave them unwavering support. What they're feeling right now is resentment. As the toxins of 4 years of love bombing start to dissipate, the Democrats are now getting a sense of reality. The reality is that your constituents are mad at you. You took it too far. Yeah, you were trying to do good, but you ignored all the bad that came from overzealous effort. You ignored all the clouds and focused on the sunshine, even when the sun wasn't shining anymore. Now you're surprised that there is a storm. Democrats have to let their people let it out because they have held it in for too long, trying to support the Democrats all these years. Then the Democrats have to actually listen to everybody who supported them, not just the young generations or those on social media. They have to listen to the dissenters among them because they're not always wrong. Then the Democrats have to take time to think it over with clear heads and decide how to move forward. I also warned that the nation's defenses have been compromised with people in the military and the police force who would turn against their own to achieve their own agenda. Since Trump won and there was a peaceful exchange of power, there were no threats of violence. However, it has come out that extremism in the military and police force is real and a real danger to the US. The article, Takeaways from the Associated Press's reporting on extremism in the military, stated, quote, while the pace at which the overall population has been radicalizing has increased in recent years, people with military backgrounds have been radicalizing at a faster rate, unquote. Another article, AP finds that a Pentagon-funded study on extremism in the military relied on old data, stated, quote, in fact, data show that since 2017, both service members and veterans are radicalizing at a faster rate than people without military training. Less than 1% of the adult population is currently serving in the U.S. military, but active duty military members make up a disproportionate 3.2% of the extremist cases start researchers found between 2017 and 2022. Even that number is thought to be an undercount, according to Michael Jensen, START's lead researcher. He noted that the military uses administrative discharges to quietly remove extremists from the ranks. Such cases do not show up in START's data because the military does not release information about them. Unquote. In the See It Coming 2024 videos, I also went through some scenarios regarding the chance of an implosion if Trump doesn't win. I also sought funding for the PND Public Safety Project, PPSP. It is a 3-year project to help the public cope with the extreme and unusual tension around the election. I fear that the psychopaths next door, PNDs, have stoked a fire of fury and will use that to cause chaos. Even though the election is over and a violent implosion was delayed because Trump won, chaos has ensued as the new administration has overtly and deliberately destabilized the U.S. government, as well as stressed international relations in less than 2 months of taking office. PPSP can still help people cope with what is currently happening. I would like PPSP to continue being an open information source for the public on recognizing PNDs and finding ways to avoid their manipulation while I move on to See It Coming 2025, which will observe the nation during the new administration's run. In See It Coming 2024, I said, he seems like the best pick for a team because he is in it to win it, no matter what. However, from what happened during the last election, Trump's methods of winning could get his supporters in trouble. While many people may not see that the U.S. has gotten in trouble, big trouble is on the horizon. I think the US is already in trouble because we are in a trade war with our allies. When I said a hot-headed president who will start problems with international leaders, I had no idea that he would pick fights with our own allies. The new administration has had a shouting match with our allies and even have made our allies look weak. I can't think of any president that has deliberately made our European allies look so weak by reminding them about how much they need us and consistently through what we've done for them in their faces. I warned that another thing to think about is how each candidate would handle international issues. A hot-headed president could lead us into a war while the country will probably be weakened by difficult internal divisions and oppositions to his or her policies. That could be true as Trump is provoking fights with our allies, threatening to take over neighboring countries, and sympathizing with dictators. I worried about an American civil war, but all this could lead to a world war. That is a recap of what I said in the See It Coming 2024 videos and how things actually turned out. It is known that the Founding Fathers spent about 4 months writing the Constitution. There was a lot of arguing and thought put into constructing the U.S. Constitution. The U.S. had freed itself from British rule, and they didn't want to go back. Most of the writers of the Constitution were first-generation Americans, while a few were born in various parts of Europe. Nonetheless, they all knew what it was like to be ruled by a monarch and didn't like it. They used their experience to draft the Constitution to prevent the U.S. from ever being under a monarch's rule again. I suppose they anticipated that a day might come when one person may feel they need to be the sole ruler of the U.S. and would attempt to take it over. They planned for it and wrote the Constitution to prevent it. During this presidency, I believe that we will see the Constitution in action. See if it can fulfill its purpose of preserving a democracy. See if the writers of the Constitution can keep fighting for America's democracy from their graves and through the Constitution that they so carefully crafted. I see the next 4 years as Trump versus the Founding Fathers. Why? Because whether or not you are a Trumper, you have to admit that his idea of democracy and how the government should operate differs from that of the writers of the Constitution. Trump wants more power centralized and outgoing from the Oval Office, while the Founding Fathers wanted a balance of power. Who will win? Time will tell. It is exciting to see this 237-year-old document fight the kind of political leader it was created to prevent from taking over. In the article, John Kelly confirms Trump privately disparaged U.S. service members and veterans. It stated, quote, "A person that thinks those who defend their country in uniform or are shot down or seriously wounded in combat or spend years being tortured as POWs are all suckers because there is nothing in it for them," Kelly said of Trump. A person that didn't want to be seen in the presence of military amputees because it didn't look good for me. A person who demonstrated open contempt for a Gold Star family, for all Gold Star families on TV during the 2016 campaign, and rants that our most precious heroes who gave their lives in America's defense are losers and wouldn't visit their graves in France. Unquote. Another article, exclusive, John Kelly goes on the record to confirm several disturbing stories about Trump. It stated, quote, in the statement, Kelly is confirming on the record a number of details in a 2020 story in The Atlantic by editor-in-chief Jeffrey Goldberg, including Trump turning to Kelly on Memorial Day 2017 as they stood among those killed in Afghanistan and Iraq in Section 60 at Arlington National Cemetery and saying, I don't get it. What was in it for them? Unquote. Trump referred to the army as an army of suckers and losers. I am bringing these statements up to show Trump preferring self-interest over his country, not to get the military against him. Trump already has a private army that includes some military leaders. So why am I bringing this up then? I'll get back to this. To be fair, I watched the video of the first Zelenskyy-Trump meeting. Trump was actually behaving during the beginning. It was Vance who instigated the argument because Zelenskyy called him out on how diplomacy with Russia was attempted and didn't work. Vance didn't seem to be ready for that. It appeared that a big ego appeared and he talked down to Zelenskyy, then triggered Trump to join the fight by saying that Zelenskyy somehow disrespected Trump, America, and the Oval Office with that statement. Trump should have known better and should have behaved better. But unfortunately, he decided to go into apprentice mode and put on his typical macho show. I am neutral and have no opinion on the Ukraine issue. With that said, I don't believe that is how the President of the United States should treat or speak to our U.S. allies. The fact of life is that not everybody is going to like each other, even in jobs and teams. Not everyone is going to get along. Those personal differences sometimes have to be set aside to get the job done. Trump may not like Zelenskyy, but this isn't about who he likes or doesn't like. This is about the U.S., and right now, Ukraine is an ally of the U.S., even if he isn't a Trump ally. Trump needed to put his feelings aside and represent the country the best way possible. Why did Trump treat Zelenskyy so harsh? I initially thought it was because Zelenskyy was the weaker of the two fighting armies and Trump values power. He is partial to the more powerful side and aligns himself with that side. This could be true, but then I read about Moscow's reaction to Trump's berating Zelenskyy during the first meeting. It gives a hint of other reasons why Trump seems partial to Russia and seems to be pushing away the U.S.'s allies. Remember that after the first meeting, Trump unapologetically undermined Ukraine's war efforts. In the article, CIA director says U.S. has paused intelligence sharing with Ukraine. It stated, quote, Trump administration officials say that the halt in assistance is a warning to the Ukrainians of the consequences of not cooperating with the president, unquote. Trump then delayed signing a mineral deal with Ukraine. I was glad to hear this because I didn't think a mineral deal was a good idea. My reasons differed from an article that I came across after stating briefly to someone that it would be a bad idea. The article, A Minerals Agreement with Ukraine Would Be a Bad Deal for America, by Peter Harris, states, quote, signing a substantial minerals deal with Ukraine, potentially worth billions of dollars, would change this political calculus in the wrong direction. Overnight, Washington would acquire a compelling interest, not just a preference, in ensuring that the government in Kyiv remains free, independent, and committed to upholding U.S. firms' lucrative mineral rights. The U.S. government would also come under heavy pressure to bankroll the physical reconstruction of Ukraine, which will be essential before companies can extract untapped natural resources and sell them for profit at market. In other words, any minerals deal would realistically be a public-private partnership requiring indefinite investments by the U.S. taxpayer. If a minerals deal is agreed to, then what would happen if Russia were to re-invade Ukraine? Would future U.S. leaders feel obliged to protect their country's commercial interests with military force? It is impossible to say for sure, but having a large economic stake in Ukraine would certainly increase the odds of America choosing to join a war in defense of Kyiv. Unquote. These are very valid reasons why a minerals deal would be bad. My reasons were a little different. The writer argued that, quote, having a large economic stake in Ukraine would certainly increase the odds of America choosing to join a war in defense of Kyiv, unquote. I beg to differ. If the latest interactions with Ukraine are considered, it could be said that Trump might actually join the war in defense of Russia. How? Trump may say that Zelenskyy is undermining U.S. interests by continuing a war that jeopardized the stakeholders in the minerals deal. If Zelenskyy chooses to give in to Russia, then the war would stop and the U.S.'s interests would be more secure. If Trump wanted, he could even join with Russia in fighting Ukraine, where he'll claim it's not because he supports Russia, but because he only wants to protect U.S. interests in Ukraine. If that happened, then we are at risk for World War III because Trump is fighting against one of our allies. Trump has been publicly provoking and bullying Zelenskyy with no regards to his country's status as an ally. Up until recently, he didn't hide that he was partial to Putin. It is only that his polls are low right now that he is pulling back, but I think that he will find some way to go back to his first stance. Trump has provoked conflict with most of North America. Greenland is geographically part of North America, although it is a sovereign nation that is linked to Denmark. In the article, A Rally in Congress, it states, quote, Trump pressed for the United States to take control of Greenland and the Panama Canal. We're going to get it one way or the other, he said of Greenland. Unquote. Is the U.S. going to become like Russia to Greenland? Is Greenland going to be our Ukraine? The U.S. as the predatory neighbor ready to seize control of an autonomous and peaceful nation? Trump has also deliberately started a trade war with Canada. In the article, Trump's quest to conquer Canada is confusing everyone. It says, quote, Trump has been unapologetic in his quest to conquer the Canadians, an effort he said in January would be conducted by economic force. The result has been a disintegration of the relationship between the U.S. and one of its closest allies and a stock market plunge over fears of ever-increasing escalation of a trade war, unquote. Trump used information given to him by Trudeau in confidence. I don't think Trudeau thought the president would use this information against him. Quote, questioned further by NBC News at the conclusion of the gathering of foreign ministers on Friday, Rubio further explained the president's position. I'll tell you how that came about, Rubio said, of promoting the annexation of Canada. Okay, he's in a meeting with Trudeau, and Trudeau basically says that if the U.S. imposes tariffs on Canada, Canada couldn't survive as a nation state, at which point the president said, well, then you should become a state. Trump, Rubio said, made an argument for why Canada would be better off joining the United States from an economic perspective and the like. He made that argument repeatedly, Rubio continued, and I think it stands for itself. Unquote. Trump is pushing away our allies and even publicly bullying one of them. This is madness. There is a method to this madness. Trump is using the U.S. to bully Ukraine without regard to how this looks to the U.S.'s other allies. This supports my theory that he is probably deliberately pushing away U.S. allies to form a new alliance with the U.S.'s adversaries. Trump mixes lies with truth. That is why it's so hard to pin him down. He also really believes that this new order is the best for the country, and he has convinced many of his supporters that this is true. As in all things, he also really believes this is good for him and his legacy. He thinks he's doing America a favor. That's why I brought up those comments about the army of losers and the soldiers not getting anything out of it. Most people can see that siding with Russia is bad for the country. If you look at it from the president's perspective, it would be good for him because if it works, he can be king. There is something in it for him, even if some people are telling him it's not good for the country. That could be why he is ignoring all the warnings of a U.S.-Russia alliance. He dismisses Putin's brutality and wrongs towards innocent people because he probably will order those types of actions against others someday. My concerns in See It Coming 2024 were that the U.S. could implode and head towards a civil war. Now, my concerns include the possibility of World War III as two established dictators and one burgeoning dictator could try to take over the world. I mentioned two established dictators. Who's the other dictator? If the U.S. sides with Russia and, let's say, North Korea, Europe will be the only major powers fighting for democracy. Europe has been fighting Russia's advances and have warned the U.S. of Russia's deceitful tendencies. North Korea has its own definition of democracy that includes a dictatorship. Their interpretation of democracy is different from the classic view of democracy. Europe has historically been in fighting and war for power for most of its existence. I think our current allies know a few things about Russia that the U.S. probably should be aware of. We need to learn more about Russia from our allies' perspective because they see Russia as a real threat for a reason. The article, Russia relishes Trump-Zelenskyy spat and accuses Ukraine and European allies of warmongering, states, quote, right now everything is being decided within a big new triangle, Russia, China, the United States. It is in this triangle where a new world order will be developed. I cannot pronounce his name. It's K-I-S-E-L-Y-O-V, mused. Dismissing Sunday's summit of European allies in London as almost clandestine and pointless. So it could be a new world order with US, Russia, and with either China or North Korea. Trump would have to work on his relationship with China a bit, so North Korea may be a substitute. There is a method to all the madness that the new administration is causing. The end goal is to go from G7 to G3. there is something in it for Trump. He would be one of the leaders of only 3 powerful countries and dominate North America, while Russia takes over Europe and North Korea or China takes Asia. It falls in line with his recent suggestions of annexing Canada, buying Greenland, taking back the Panama Canal, and renaming the Gulf of Mexico. Trump doesn't just want to rule the US, he wants to rule the West. He'll sell this to his followers as making America one of the greatest countries in the world and king of the Western world. He would brag about increasing America's territory and power by aligning with Russia and North Korea or China to form a powerful trio. I'm starting to think that this is his end goal. There is a method to his madness. Unfortunately, not all Americans are with him, and it's hard to take over a stable country. So he will destabilize a country by pushing buttons so that he could get as close to civil war as possible, maybe even actually having one. The purpose is to shatter the country so he can rebuild it the way he wants to, with less resistance from those desperate for peace. I could be wrong, but with the amount of information that I have right now, I think this could be his plan. At first, I thought Putin was the one to talk Trump into such a plan, but after seeing some videos on how Trump exploited the Proud Boys' destructive and hostile tendencies, it could have been the other way around. Trump likes to recruit people with violent and psychopathic tendencies. He seems to know how to control and exploit those types. I could see Trump sitting down with Putin, realizing that Putin is similar to the people he is already using, and went for it. Putin could be his henchman in the European area. He is more likely to go along with the plan than the US's current allies. Russia doesn't have much to lose, but so much to gain in such a deal. It could also be that Trump and Putin came to the conclusion at the same time while talking to each other. From the information in this video, you can start to see that the Trump administration doesn't see favoring Russia as the US's decline. No, Trump currently needs the US to be powerful. He sees it as increasing the US's power and eventually his own power. By aligning the US and himself with Russia, he can be part of this new big triangle. It's a step forward in his mind, more money and more power. That's what Trump is interested in, not all that mushy humanitarian and environmental stuff. So stop it. Just kidding. I am not calling Trump a psychopath because I am not a licensed mental health professional and I have never interviewed him. My research is on PNDs, the psychopath next door, the psychopaths who do wrong and usually don't get caught or get away with it. I have 4 levels right now of PNDs and Trump has been steadily climbing to the top of the absolute PND list. When I first started the research and knew nothing about PNDs, let alone psychopaths, I made the same mistake as most people are making right now and looked at high conflict personality types through the lens of normal, flawed, or even bad human beings. I am telling you now that is a big mistake, and you can get very little understanding of PNDs from observing them this way. I accidentally learned about these types of psychopathic personalities by reading The Psychopath Next Door by Martha Stout. It helped save my life and launch my research. I suggest that those interested start here because it helps make you more aware of the PNDs around you. You're not going to fully understand what you're seeing at first because for me, it was like discovering a new species of people. If you delve deeper, you will start to know more and hopefully learn how to protect against these types of predatory individuals. Trump has a lot of PND qualities, though I am not officially claiming he is a PND. I never spoke to him, I never met him. However, the US is in grave danger, and his administration has a plan for this country that a lot of people, even some Republicans, don't agree with. I hear of the resistance and fighting back, but if you do not learn about PNDs, you are more likely to lose too many battles to win a war. They know war. He wants a fight. There are two reasons for all the executive orders. One is IOUs for Trumpers. Trump held his end of the bargain, and those orders will be presented when he needs to collect, when he needs their unwavering support to achieve the next step of his plan. The other reason is to cause chaos and provoke a fight. Those who oppose Trump should learn from Jan 6 and hold fire, or else there will be an all-out war that the other side is more than ready to fight. There is a time to fight, but this time it's going to have to be a Cold War. I'm not telling anyone to go out and assassinate or hurt anyone. No matter how powerful a psychopath is, they know that there is a natural power that is always more powerful than them. They know that they cannot make the sun rise or the moon fall. Even if they don't believe in God, they are probably aware of karma. As one diagnosed psychopath said after she decided to get a handle on her psychopathy, it all comes back to bite you in the end. They will get what is coming to them. Those who want to be better need to survive and fight off psychopaths as much as they can without harming themselves or putting themselves in a lot of danger. I'm not on any side. I'm for the country. I try to call it as I see it so that the situation is understood from different perspectives. We are living during a critical, complicated, and dangerous time that can set the course for the future of America. Stay informed, vigilant, and always work for good.